Hi everybody, today is a bit special to me. I'm doing a remake of my very first ever YouTube video, my easy everyday sourdough bread, which is my first video over on the Soap channel now. But I'm going to do a remake of that, showing how you can use a very simple process with no technicalities, no weighing anything, with whole grain flours, and I'm going to freshly mill the grains as well. I wanted to show this because it's all well and good to calculate hydration and get really specific and go really deep into the learning of how you can make really good bread, and those things are valuable if you've got the time, but not everybody does have the time or the energy for that, and I don't a lot of the time. So this is a really simple way that you can just get a really decent loaf of bread without too much energy being consumed in the process. This is really special to me because my bread baking for many years before I started milling my own grains, it was very much a freestyling affair. But once I started milling my own flours, I got kind of caught up on the details, especially hydration. I wanted to know the percentage. But I've kind of come full circle now and relaxing a lot more with it. And I just wanted to share that with you and show you that there is another way. So I hope you enjoy this. Let's make the bread. I'm going to start off with milling my grain. I have actually weighed these grains. It's about the only thing I do weigh these days. So I've got 450 grams of hard white wheat, and I've got 50 grams of rye as well. And that's just to stay a bit true to my original recipe. I threw a little bit of rye flour in, so I'm going to throw a little bit of rye grain in. But if you don't want to weigh anything, you want to be really old school, 2.5 cups of grain is about 500 grams. So I could just get 2.5 cups of grain, and that would be roughly all you need for this recipe. And in terms of flour, if you're not milling your own grain, this recipe, it's about 3.5 cups of flour. I'm going to put my rye in with my wheat and just mill the two together, which is what I generally do. I just do them all on the one setting. There we have our 3.5 to 4 cups of flour. If you are just using flour and you pack your flour quite loosely, use 4 cups. If you pack yours a little bit more tightly in your cups, just use 3.5. That'll be about right. I'm going to bake this loaf in my old blue Dutch oven, just as I did in my original video, but we don't need that yet, so I'll get that out of the way. Once you've got your flour, it's very easy. Just add your salt. I use about 1.5 teaspoons. I'm just using pink Himalayan salt, but use whatever salt you like. Now, I was also experimenting with psyllium husk all those years ago when I did my first video. So to stay true to that recipe, I'm going to add just a smallish spoon of psyllium husk as well. This is like a parfait spoon, teaspoon type thing, just a heaped one. Psyllium husk is an interesting ingredient. Obviously you get more fibre if you use it, but with highly hydrated whole grain doughs, it can be a nice little binder. You don't need a lot of it like you do with a lot of the gluten-free recipes, but a little bit can really help give a loaf a lift, particularly if you're using weak wheat flour. My wheat flour is quite strong, but if you've got weak flour, like a lot of the Indian wheats are a little bit weaker, or they're softer flours, softer grains, so just a different type of wheat. So a little bit of psyllium can give them a bit of a boost, but that's optional. I also add a little bit of sesame seeds just because my dear husband loves them, and that's what I put in my original loaf too. Bit of sesame just for flavour. So that's the dry ingredients. Mix those around. Really, all you need is the flour and the salt. The psyllium and the sesame seeds are completely optional. I'm just following my original video just for old time's sake, just to see the difference. That recipe had 2 cups of all-purpose flour and 1 cup of whole wheat flour and the psyllium and the sesame. But this one's obviously an all whole grain version, freshly milled too. Good stuff. So we're not going to do a lot of mixing or any kneading of this at all. It's a no knead recipe. So make sure you mix your salt and any other dry ingredients through your flours really well. Ground flaxseed or ground linseeds is absolutely beautiful in this as well. I love that. All right, make a little well in the center. Then measure out 2 cups of water. So 2 metric cups of water is about 500 mils, which is about 500 grams of water. So this loaf is going to be, pretty wet loaf, but I'm not going to measure it too much. I've just got 2 cups measured out here, and I'll probably use nearly all of this. So I'm going to pour in almost all of it because I've made this so many times. I know it can take it. Then I just get my starter out of the fridge. Good old Boris. It's cold. It's been in there for a few days, so it's a bit old. But we'll just pop that in. Put that in the water. It's probably about 1/2 to 2/3 of a cup. This is just the easy way that I've been making my bread for years. This is great workday bread. So if you mix this in the morning, which is what I showed in my first video, mix it in the morning, go off to work for the day, and you can bake it at night. So this idea works really well because you can distribute or dissolve your starter in your water all in the one bowl. You don't need to use other bowls or anything. Just mix that through before you incorporate all the other flour. Kind of creates a nice little bowl for you to be able to do that. And then once your starter is distributed a bit through the water, you can start bringing in the other flour. I just use this spoon for mixing my dough and my starter. These really rigid, long-handled parfait spoons are great. Keep mixing. I like to mix this a lot from the center and slowly incorporate the flour from the outside because it makes sure that that starter is mixed through really, really well and there's no lumps. You don't want any lumps of starter in your dough. So I'm pretty sure that's all starter is really well mixed there, so I'll just mix through the rest of the flour. Now, with my eyeball method, I look at that and I think at this point, yeah, it could probably take a little bit more water. Because this is a no-knead dough, there's no handling of this at all. You just mix it, ferment it, and then shape it later in the day. You can get away with a fairly sloppy dough because you don't have to handle it too much. The technique I'll show you later to shape it with my trusty spatula. This is my new one. You don't need a spatula, but it is really, really easy if you've got one of those spatulas. So once my dough is pretty squidgy, Norman from the Whole Grain Sourdough group, if you're watching this, this is what I call a fairly optimally squidgy dough. Anyway, I don't know if he'll see this, but if he does. I look at that and I think, yeah, could take even a bit more water. But it doesn't really matter. I like a fairly wet dough. Remember my one here has got psyllium husk in it, which is very, very absorbent. So it's going to stiffen up the dough a little bit. And yeah, okay, that's nicely squidgy now. All right, I think that'll do it. How much water's left in there? Oh, a tiniest bit, about a tablespoon. So, you know, if you're looking at hydration, it's probably close to about 100%. But we're not worrying about that. You just want a nice, moist dough, especially if you're using really hard, strong wheat like I am. It's very soft. See how wet and soft it is? If you're using wheat in Canada or some parts of the US, different, or ancient grains, ancient wheats or spelt, don't use that much water. Just use a bit less. Make it a little bit drier, probably. Although, you'll only know if you try. So, but that's about perfect for my flour. And that's it. Put the lid on that. And just leave that somewhere to ferment for the rest of the day. I will feed up my starter as well and let that rise up again before I put it back in the fridge. Pretty much the time that you leave this depends on your circumstances and the weather. In winter, I have no hesitation in leaving this all day. So if I need to go to work during the day or go out, I'll mix this in the morning. I can just leave it all day. It'll ferment really slowly in cold weather. Although freshly milled flour is a bit warmer than store-bought flour because it's warm from the milling, so bear that in mind. But generally that will last all day and it's not going to over ferment. You want to ferment this fairly well. It's you're going to want it to almost double. It's got to be nice and bubbly, which we're going to see later in the glass bowl. In summer, what I used to do, and this is what one of the tricks I showed in my video, my first video, was I put this in a cooler with an ice brick all day. And that's how I used to make my bread on work days in summer all the time. Quickly mix my dough in the morning, put it in my big cooler box with an ice brick and leave it there all day. Come home at night, it will be perfectly bubbly. Shape it down, rise it and bake it. All right, I'm back now. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon and the dough is super well fermented. It's well and truly doubled in size. You can see all those air bubbles in the dough. Well and truly ready to shape. I did have this in the oven that had just been turned on for a minute and then turned off just to speed it up so that I could still film while I had the daylight. But normally in winter this would take all day, you know, like till about 6 p.m. or something. But obviously in summer, or if you're artificially warming up the environment, then it's going to be a lot faster. So just manipulate those temperatures to suit your needs. Yeah, so the next trick is really easy, just to shape this bread. I'm actually just going to bake this using this bit of non-stick baking paper or parchment paper, and I'm going to spray it with water. And this is in keeping with my original video. This is the exact easy method that I used back then. I do use this spatula to shape the dough, but if you don't have one, just wet your hands and shape it by hand like a stretch and fold type thing. Or these plastic scrapers work really well too, but you'll get what I mean. So basically I'm just gonna shape this dough into a ball. I'm kind of like stretching and folding it with the spatula. I'm just pulling it in from the sides onto itself. Wow, it smells very well fermented. And once it's got a bit of tension to it, nearly there. Once you can feel it getting a bit tight and kind of resisting, same as if you were stretching and folding it with your hand, you can just put a bit of water on your bench if you want to. In my original video, I just tipped this straight onto the paper, but today I'm going to just shape it a little bit more with my hands as well. Very roughly. Just basically bringing it to a really simple round shape. That's all it is. Nothing fancy. Just plonk it on there. And then Get your bowl, just give it a quick little wipe out, but you don't even really need to do that. Pick up the paper that's been dampened and put the dough back into the bowl to proof. So you don't need a proofing basket or anything at all. You just put it on the paper, use the paper as a sling and pop it back in your bowl. The reason why I wet the paper is it stops the dough and the spatula from sticking to it, so you can just press out any creases in the side of the paper. And that's it. We'll leave the dough now just for the final proof, probably be an hour and a half or so. I'll keep an eye on it. It's been an hour and a half and the bread is ready to bake. It's got a little bit of a wobble to it. That's generally how I go. I kind of look at the size, and if it's looking a little bit airy and it's got a wobble, it's probably ready to bake. So I'll just get my Dutch oven. This Dutch oven is preheated to about 210 degrees Celsius. And all I'm going to do is pick up the dough just by the little corners there and pop it in. I'm going to give another little spray of water, and that just helps me to flatten out the paper again without it sticking to the spatula or the dough, and that just stops you getting lumps in the side of your dough. All right, that is ready to bake. I'll get that in the oven now for probably 40 minutes to start off with, and I'll have a look. All right, it's been 40 minutes. Let's have a look. Ooh, love it when that steam comes off. That looks pretty good. Yep. Pretty happy with that. I'm going to put it in for maybe another 10 minutes to bake. Probably just leave the lid off now and just let it brown up a bit. Well, here it is, folks. The final loaf. It looks great. It's got a good size, so I know it's going to be, reasonably airy for a 100% whole grain sourdough loaf. Let's take it out of the pot. Ooh, I'm so excited about this. This is a bit of history repeating itself with this loaf. Fantastic. I hope this paper comes off. This is some cheap paper that our friend left us with some of his kitchen gear when he moved to Western Australia. It's not very good. Oh yeah. That's okay. Oh, very dark crust on the bottom. Lovely. Probably a little bit too dark. My Dutch oven always does that a little bit. That loaf is really good. I can tell it's light just by my experience of knowing what light bread feels like. But again, it is 100% whole wheat and rye. So, it's not going to be a fluffy loaf. But I cannot wait to cut that and show you. I'll do a quick little cutting video in the morning. Well, I'm back. It's early the next morning now, and I'm going to cut this bread open and have a little looky inside. It's lost its crunch, but whole grain sourdough does that. Looks good. You won't get a wildly open crumb with this bread because I didn't do any kneading or stretching and folding or anything like that. But I think, given that I didn't do anything really at all to develop the dough in this bread, that's a pretty good crumb. It's literally a no-knead bread, whole grain sourdough. So I hope you enjoyed that, everybody, and enjoyed coming along the ride with me for my retake of my old easy everyday sourdough bread. It's nice to do the updated whole grain version. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks everyone. I'll see you in the next video.